And with that, I will turn it over to Workforce Solutions Group E-Team member and my dear friend for a long time, although she's way younger than me, Marybeth. I know, I was trying to be nice.
I was giving you a shout out. Why did you?
Marybeth Campbell, everybody.
I don't know why I just admitted that. Thank you, Tim. And for fundraising, I think a Tim OnlyFans page. Am I right? Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for being generous and open and maybe a little crazy for inviting the Ripple Effect back this year. We had a great time last year when we were up at Devon's with David Delmar. We have an awesome guest in Chris Shannon today. We're going to be talking a lot of different things, but a lot has happened since we were here in the last year, Ron. Are you right?
A lot has happened. There's been a lot of development. I mean, last year we were here, the conversation was like, is AI going to stay? Like, do we get rid of it? Now we like, hey man, we're going to have to figure out how to incorporate AI, and so things definitely changed. But one thing that hasn't changed, in my opinion, is what is the greatest invention, talk about technology that has ever been made. I think a whiteboard is really the most remarkable invention.
No, don't start off that way.
No?
Remarkable,
I'll get that one later.
Right?
Y'all get that one later. They'll get that one later.
No, yeah, that's a thinker. I think the dad joke thinker. Check out Ron's LinkedIn page. He's a purveyor of dad jokes. But no, a lot has happened in the last year since we've been here. Ron has found love. Ron's found love.
That's true. You just kind of fall into that though, right? I wasn't looking for it.
Yeah,
That's when you let go, it finds you.
It does. When we left our podcast last year at this time, Ron convinced 20 people to sign up and subscribe to the Ripple Effect. So we left here with 120 subscribers in total. We started that day with 100. We got 20 people to sign up. And right now, of this moment, we have a robust 138 subscribers.
Appreciate y'all.
So check us out on the Ripple Effect.
Trending upward.
This is episode number 22, I think, that we have. We have 21 in the queue already. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, all your fun listening platforms. So check us out. We hope to leave here with at least one more subscriber, maybe two, round us up to 140. But no, so much has happened. I found the magic and love of sertraline and GLP-1s. So that's been good.
That's always a good thing, I think, right?
And our democracy is, the threads of our democracy are being lit on fire by large torches. So we haven't talked a ton about that, but we're going to talk a little bit about where trauma comes into play in learning and development and trauma-informed practices in work and in workforce development and youth employment in particular, which is why we have invited Chris Shannon, Senior Associate from a Corporation for a Skilled Workforce. Many of you know Chris from many other hats and roles she's worn over the years in the workforce system, the Federal Reserve, and in financial literacy. So Chris kind of got sucked into this guest role. We just happened to be having some little catch-up chat about a month and a half, 2 months ago. And as we were talking, I was like, you got to be on the Ripple Effect. So here you are today, and we're so glad that you're here.
I'm so glad to be here.
Yes.
This is awesome.
And Ron and I didn't really introduce ourselves.
Yeah, but I mean, to the 138 subscribers, they already know who we are. So, I mean, do we really? My name's Ron Waddell, co-founder and executive director of Legendary Legacies. And so that panel that was just up, was of big interest to me because this nonprofit that I founded and lead works with returning citizens and those who are at the highest risk of being impacted by community violence. I'm also on a couple of other boards, and I get to do this fun show with Marybeth. And look, don't she got the best shoes though, y'all? Like for real. Even the fella, y'all gotta give it up for the shoes. She always got the best shoes.
How about the shoes?
That's why mine are hidden behind this.
Those are cute. I like a good sneaker.
Well, you have to introduce yourself now.
Yeah, so Marybeth Campbell. Many of you know me from my days in the workforce world. I'm now the CEO of Worcester Community Action Council. Shout out to my team over there, a JEC team. Make sure you connect with our awesome team and tell them everything you know about workforce, and they'll tell you all the great things that they know and they're doing in our work at Worcester Community Action Council. WCAC is one of 23 community action agencies across the state, working really hard as anti-poverty agencies. And that's kind of how Ron and I met. Ron briefly worked at WCAC and had the great sense of mind to leave and start Legendary Legacies. And we've been partnering together ever since then, including on this show. And we've had awesome conversations with people and excited to do that again today with Chris. We're going to talk a lot about looking at systems from a different lens. I think this morning's conversations from the Secretary and President Glenn's high energy start off for us, threading throughout all of the conversations, were really robust and I think tie in a lot to a little different lens that we're bringing to the conversation around where learner voice comes into the workforce system in training and learner voice turning into employee voice. Some ways that we can apply trauma-informed practices to create sense of belonging in the workplace, but also in the workforce system and in training. Chris has some great resources that she's going to talk about in Lincoln, I think, to a lot of the discussion that was had earlier on the many panels. So we're going to try to thread those things together.
Yeah, and I want to say, I just recently met Chris. So for all y'all that know, y'all know how dope this person is. And so I'm just excited to be here to chop it up with you and just kind of learn from you as well, from the different areas you've been in. And, you know, if you've listened to the podcast, you know how we always started. We want to know a little bit of your origin story. How did you even get into this? Like when you was a little girl, I want to be this when I grow up. That's what you wanted to do. You couldn't wait to be in workforce development. That's what you aspired to do.
I was going to be Nancy Drew.
The...
That's what I was going to be. I was totally going to be Nancy Drew. As a matter of fact, looking for the boyfriend, the two girl best friends, they had to fit all of the characteristics, the car. Yeah, that didn't pan out. But I started off as a teacher after 9/11. I decided that I didn't want to work in a place where I landed because it wasn't very intentional. And I wanted to move to where I wanted to be, which is actually New England. So I free fell into New England and thought, you know, well, I'll become an educational consultant. Yeah, that didn't pan out either because I didn't even know what that was, much less where to find that work.
No one knows what a consultant is, no one.
And I landed at a career center and kept coming back as a job seeker. And they liked me so much they kept me. And that was the one in Woburn. So shout out to my Woburn friends at Mass Hire. And then I got sucked into the workforce development system and found that there was a lot that I could do. So 12 years in the workforce development system in Lawrence, and then at Bristol Community College doing the tech prep stuff, and then Quincy before going to the Fed, and the trajectory of where I am now at the Corporation for a Skilled Workforce with my colleague Trish McGuire, who I don't dare talk about trauma and resilience work because that is what she does every day. So
you're next on the show. Don't worry, next year.
For the Corporation for a Skilled Workforce, for the listeners that don't know what that is, what do you guys do? Why is it important? And why does they have someone dope like you on staff? So just tell us a little bit about that.
I need you as my hype man. So in 2006, I became aware of the Corporation for a Skilled Workforce when I found a benchmarking report on like the characteristics of the most effective WIBs. And it became my Bible for like the next 8 years. So ever since then, they do a national survey, the largest data set of programs so they can compare programs to programs. In Lawrence, we were always compared to the Boston PIC, which is a completely different environment, flavor, assets, challenges. And it's hard to make that apple-to-apple comparison. So we are able to do that through the survey. But we're a national nonprofit trying to move economic mobility and racial justice in the education and workforce development spaces. And we have a variety of ways that we do that.
So when we were talking about, we were prepping for this call and what had prompted the invite during our chat, we were talking a little bit about recent research that you've been working on through the Corporation for Skilled Workforce and other things that you're a natural researcher. I know you love data and digging into things. And data is one of the areas that we wanted to kind of touch on today because I think all of us can relate to, if not lament, some of the challenges of data and data collection in the workforce world, and what outputs versus impact really look like. And I think as we've come out of the pandemic in particular, but as we're also experiencing the uncertainty and federal and state dollars, and how that leads us to think, maybe leads us into opportunities to think a little more creatively. This idea of where trauma-informed, centering belonging, really looking at data in a different way that brings people in their experience from the training program into the workforce, into our kind of thinking. And can you just share a little bit about some of the research you've been doing that kind of shifts almost entirely away from what we've been conditioned to track in the workforce world?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I would be remiss to say I'm doing the research. I am not. We have a team of incredibly dope, skilled, brilliant people. And so a lot of times I'm simply learning from them. And some of this research has come from others that I work with. But we've had the benefit of working on several projects that were centered on co-learning, which was great. There was a funder in Minneapolis that was very interested in learning with their grantees. And they asked a very interesting question. If you were going to select a metric that you felt more closely aligned with your mission and was a better indicator of program success, what would that be? And what surfaced from that was really fascinating. And one of the through threads from all of these very different organizations serving very different populations was really sense of belonging. And that's what first put it on my radar. And then a colleague did research on worker-centered benchmarking. If workforce program participants could define program success, what would they call it? Wages were not number one. Wages were not number two. Wages were not number three. Wages didn't even make the top 5. So one of the things that I've grown to realize is what I call flippantly the WIOA 6. WIOA workforce metrics are very transactional in nature, and they only capture a snapshot at the individual level. One of the reasons, I hate this phrase, but it's true, best kept secret. How many times we said that about our programs and our work? We're the best kept secret. You know, like businesses don't know about us, job seekers don't know about us, nobody knows about us. One of the reasons we're the best kept secret is because we can't speak to the impact we have if we stick with those metrics. We cannot. So, and it's not that they're bad metrics, but they lack context. And they really don't speak, you know, if you have a young adult coming into your program who is housing unstable, low income, sofa surfers, we used to call them, you know, just getting that person housing stable is a success, but not according to the metrics. So that is problematic. And one of the things that I have learned is that we are constantly, if we build it, they will come. So one of the, I love something that happened at a conference. They had a speaker talk and work on a fail fest. And I recommend this for next year for your podcast, do a fail fest. And one of the things two crown achievements of failures for me was building 2 different workforce programs without consulting the populations I was going to serve. And I created a summer job program for young adults with disabilities. And with the mentality, and we have it all the time, if we build it, they will come. They did not come, which created an issue. And you know, for the organization, for me, for them. So the idea of centering the voices of the people we serve and then centering the voices of staff in our operations to ensure that we are power sharing with them and that we all have equal voice, we will reap the rewards on the other end with the outcomes because they now have skin in the game.
What you're saying makes so much sense, Chris, right? And you got the data to prove it all. The hard part about all of this is the human component of change. Mm-hmm. Like none of us like change. I mean, even when it's in your face, I think I'll be nerding out reading reports and stuff. And so there's this thing from the 1970s, 80s, I think it was, the Swedes figured out how to reduce firefighter deaths based on a new technique in which they would take the hose from a stream and turn it to a fog because it would actually cool the smoke in the room. And so they brought that to American firefighters, and they were like, look, this is what you got to do. And they were like, why would we do that? And they were like, no, I'm telling you, look at the numbers, look at the data. And if you go and find that report, it's fascinating as a case study, because there was so much about the firefighting culture, but it was really rooted in the human component of change and confirmation bias, that even though in front of me what you're showing me is factual and I should do it, I'm so accustomed to how we do it that I won't change. And then you're dealing with massive systems. I think about Marybeth coming in and her role. We talk about changing the culture and shifting the culture of WCAC as the new ED there. And so I wonder, in this, as much of the data you're getting, like, what is it a workforce or even employers need to focus on? And for me, I was talking to a brilliant friend, Rodrigo Canales, who is organizational development at Boston University. And what he really spoke to was values are the anchor in the midst of change. And so being, not like we all have company values, but like they have to be lived, they have to be wrestled with, especially in the midst of so much change. And so I wonder what that looks like, and what skill is it that employers and workforce needs to be comfortable with in conflict and ambiguity, right? Because that's where innovation exists. And like with everything that's converging at this time, like we need to find the ability to be okay in ambiguity, but then that is also going to increase the need for communication mechanisms and systems to make sure that there is more trust that are built on certain values that will hold the culture of what you're trying to do, right? And so then how might you think about this data influencing the value structure of workforce and or employers that are bringing this through? Because there's a whole different set of values that you need to embody when you think about housing stability for my employee, right? That's a different value set than, hey, what is the outcome for either the shareholders or the grant that is being requested of me or my superior? So how might you see this data helping shift that in any way? Because change is hard.
Yeah, change is hard, absolutely. If it were easy, everybody would be doing it. But one of the things I think about is that, you know, when you think about workforce development practitioners, none of them are in it for the money. They are all in it for the heart. Every person in this room is doing it because they believe passionately in making a difference in the world. And the metrics that we currently measure are disconnected from that. And that is problematic. And if you think about frontline staff in workforce development organizations who have to do the extractive work of getting data and information from program participants for intake, for eligibility, and then they don't necessarily benefit from what the data looks like on the other end, there's a data democracy or a feedback loop issue where there are some people who are like the keepers of the data and they use it for strategic planning. Does that ever go back to the frontline staff who might be able to add some context to that data and say, we should really be focusing on this instead of this? So what happens is you end up with people who come in because they're driven by the heart, but then they're forced to comply with metrics, which is like, I enjoy data. I don't even know enough to be dangerous, but I enjoy data. But if I had to do that day in and day out, I would hate it, because I would be completely missing out on the heart, the reason why I'm in that job. We're mission-driven orgs, but we're not mission-driven staff. So that creates a corporate culture, especially when it's metrics and it becomes not metrics for learning, but it's metrics for compliance. And that becomes the environment that we create, that we perpetuate. And that's what really needs to change. That's where you need to start. And then you can start having those conversations of, all right, we know we have to measure these things, but what's the one metric that really matters to us? How do we know we're making the difference we want to make so that they can bring the heart back into it?
Yeah, I run a community action program. Do we have any other CAP agencies in in the audience? Any CAP folks? I also have to give Janice Ryan Weeks a shout out from the Mass Hire Worcester, but also WCAC board member. I don't know where Janice is right now, but I know she's around. We abide by something called ROMA. It's the Results Oriented Management System. Doesn't it sound fun?
Oh,
doesn't it sound amazing? It's all it is service counts and outputs, and that's entirely how our formula funding is ultimately brought to our coffers. It has nothing to do with the impact of what we're doing on the ground. And when I took the helm in 2019, I was like, I don't really want to run a regular normal community action agency. And I have amazing peers across the 23 CAPs across the state who have a similar frame of mind. We can't solve poverty with just looking at outputs. We can't solve poverty by not including people in the conversation around what does success look like to you. We can't solve poverty by offering a menu of services and saying pick from one of these. And I think there are parallels in often publicly funded organizations where you're forced to these outputs and not to the actual human-centered needs that are happening every day as people come in and out of our doors. And we've kind of been conditioned to that. And Ron Marrio said earlier, he kind of made a reference around, the collectivism and collaboration and actually pairing strengths across organizations rather than being a diffuse model yourself or diluting your model by chasing dollars. And I think that's where I would implore our funders and our policymakers to completely rethink and make the change around how we're actually, what are those impacts and not the outputs that we're striving to meet, because I think based on the last panel on untapped talent, I think if we can acknowledge that there are barriers to people entering the workforce and staying in the workforce, we need to also be able to track not just what those clear barriers are, but why do people not stay in their job? Do they not feel comfortable at work? Are their coworkers and peers not culturally proficient? Are they not understanding a perspective of where someone's walking through the door from a day-to-day basis? And as an employer, I have struggled with the line of, I'm not someone's mental health provider, but I have to acknowledge that there are traumas and triggers in people's life that make them choose a tone, an interaction, and my own traumas and triggers. I did mention that my staff was here, so they could tell you some stories. But I think that we have to, as employers, and I'm an employer that's also a social service provider, this is the change. This is the new way of how we need to think about doing business and retaining and thinking about how we're developing high quality jobs that are not just about wages and benefits, which are really important, but that people want to continue working there and be part of and contribute to the work. Whether you're in the private sector and, in pharmaceuticals or finance or your social services, we have to think about employees as people very differently. But our data doesn't always allow us to fund those things the same way.
Well, performance management doesn't either. Yeah. We approach, I say globally, back in the day when I was doing workforce development, my program participants were people that need to be fixed. They weren't assets, and that was a frame of mind that I had to really work on because the metrics kind of force you into that frame of mind. It's just like performance management. Performance management is like, so I've been watching you and I've noticed these deficits and now we're going to have a conversation about what you need to fix. As opposed to that thing you did last week, that was really great. Do more of that. So how do we flip that mindset to more of an asset frame?
It's interesting, Chris, because I'll pivot the conversation just a little bit, but we were talking about just before we came on, and I think you just alluded.
You promised me you wouldn't talk about that, Ron.
I won't tell them about the rash I had. No, I'm just kidding. You didn't know that was coming.
Just paying attention to that.
And it was all downhill from there.
But we were talking, and I think it connects to some of this conversation in total. Being in what someone in the military might call a VUCA situation, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That's where we are. That's what we're dealing with. And so being able to look at the current data that we capture, because that worked for a certain time, right? as we are identifying with new research, generations change, all that, then we also have to change. And what we were talking about is shifting that mindset from the extractive nature, right? Where I'm given a set, and I get it, because I work grad. So many people need to get through this program, and then there's pressure from the employer because I need to fill these positions, right? And so there's a tension between how quickly can we, to sound cold, how quickly can we, or I'll sound like the first grant officer that I got funding from, how many units, not people, right? That's how we abstract people. But how many units can I get through this workforce program? And so my focus is that, and it's not on the humanity of the individual. I've kind of abstracted the human from it and really only need you for what you can produce for me. And so that tension between what you are alluding to about why most of us get into this work because of the heart of it, up against a structure that even can cause us in this work to experience burnout because we are being something that we don't want to be, you know? And I just think that's really interesting to think about and then say, how might someone within their space, is it just by changing the metrics that we capture? Do you think that really will like shift the whole, like, I don't know, like, is it like?
I don't know. And you know, be great. Wouldn't it be great if we walked out of here and there were like 30 different experiments going on that we could report back on and share, like learning together rather than we still treat each other like we're competition and we're not. You know, how do we grow together as a field? But I think about lean manufacturing, having attended lean manufacturing trainings in this very institution, and that whole push versus pull model, you know, and it's like, how can we build a point where people are clamoring to come in because they feel psychological safety and a sense of belonging in workforce programs? When we ask workforce program participants, what is the number one metric that you would like to measure that would indicate program success? And they said safety and sense of belonging, psychological safety and sense of belonging in the workforce program was number one. And then safety and sense of belonging in the job placement was number two. And to me, that speaks volumes. So if we co-designed with them a program. I mean, I remember 6 o'clock at the Career Center calling people. So did you get the job yet? What are you getting paid? What's your title? You know,
it's very, our data is also very invasive, and that's true across the board. You know, we run fuel assistance, so people come to apply to get heating supplements, and you know, we're asking. It is such an invasive, unsafe process. In fear-laden process, and I think there's a part of that in the workforce system because there's the fear of not achieving the outcome, because the mutual objective is I want to get a good job, I want to be trained in a skill and get a good job, and I think there's a lot of fear laden in that because of how where the pressure is to get to an outcome. Yeah.
So you mentioned 30 experiments coming out of here. That'd be tremendous. Report back, get some data, right? We love the data. But also, I wanted to ask you to continue to build on this. How do we scale more alumni-driven workforce programs where that voice is being heard, right, to inform how we go about doing our workforce development?
So this is not new information. This is something that I know workforce boards and especially training programs have been wanting to do for years, but it's like the financial constraints. You know, so how do we have an advisory council of program participants? I mean, we just put them in a job. They can't take time away from the job to come and do this. So there's some interesting things that I've learned over the past year that I'm like, if I could go, Marybeth, honest to God, if you saw the list of questions this woman sent me ahead of time, But she asked me, like, if you could go back 20 years, what would you do differently that would move systems change? I had no idea that you can use WIOA dollars to pay program participants at a consultant rate as consultants, as subject matter experts in their own lived experience.
All right.
So it's not like I'm going to pay you the minimum wage because that's all our budget can allow. No, I can actually pay them a consultancy rate to be in an advisory council. If we could have done that with the youth-based programs, we probably would have completely redesigned everything back in the day. And so there are, for today, who knows by tomorrow, but there are funding possibilities there that can make these types of things happen if you're intentional and you plan ahead of time for it, But including the voices of those that you're trying to impact, I just feel it's really critical. And there is nothing more interesting and exciting than learning side by side with a participant. I mean, the power dynamic completely shifts and it creates a relationship, which means no longer you're extracting that information. I don't see you as the Community Action Council. I see you as Marybeth. And hey, Marybeth, I got the job and I want to share it with this friend I made, not with this person who was in charge of me.
No, I do. I think in the workplace, that's the power dynamic and the psychological safety is that's something that is front of mind for some of the work that WCAC is doing. And I know there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of this work too. But that's, I look at one metric, the increased number of staff needing to use FMLA. And I think it's a great tool and it ought to be used. But I get worried about, well, what are we doing as an employer, that's not helping somebody feel like they can be successful in their job, or what supports do we need to make sure we're retaining good talent that is facing, things outside in life. We all have things happening. So that's why I think it's a really good tool and it's an important tool that thankfully Massachusetts has, and the federal government Massachusetts has a specific policy. But the uptick in use of that makes me really nervous about, as an employer, what are we doing to either contribute to the need to do that, to utilize that tool, or that we're not recognizing how someone's coming into the space and feeling good about being in the space and doing their job and giving the heart and the all that we need them to do. And I don't know necessarily how to track that. I don't know how to, other than try to train and mobilize and look at ways that we're doing our DEI work. And by the way, this is being recorded. And we're doubling down on our DEI work. I don't care what the feds say. I don't care what anyone says. And we can call it whatever we want to call it. We want successful people to work with people to be successful, right? So we need to play that role. And I think in the workforce training world, I think everyone in this room does, and I know so many people in this room that have been working in this field for so long. And the contextualized job training and the on-the-job training, all that stuff is critical and amazing. I don't know that we're always contextualizing and mirroring that psychological safety work. And that the reality of what is happening in our world today that does contribute to trauma, and not feeling bifurcated, feeling, not that you have a sense of belonging in the workplace. We have a responsibility in the workforce system and as employers to contribute to making that better.
So 2 quick resources. We have the report around, I happen to have a copy right here, Make Decisions With Us, Not About Us, which is the metrics that the workers developed, and it includes like how you would measure this. So that's a really handy guide, and it tells you what the process was for creating
put that in the show notes.
An advisory council like that. And also, once again, shout out to my colleague, Trish McGuire. Her team has created 4 quick guides on trauma and resilience that are free. And the 4th one is my absolute favorite because it talks about how to create a trauma-informed culture in your workplace. And I think that's a really great place to start. But I do want to go back to the extractive nature because it's not just with the participants or even sometimes with our employees. I need something from you and I'm paying you for it. But it's also with our partners. And like, how can we engage with more learning conversations with our partners? I think about, and I wanted to double down on something that Lane Glenn said earlier, bringing up, like credit for prior learning. That is something that the community colleges have been working on for years, and they've really got that down. And competency-based training, they've got that down. But we're not learning about it in workforce development. Why aren't we doing competency-based training in our programs so we can give participants who do have transferable skills credit for what they've learned before, streamlining them through the program so they don't have to wait 9 months to get that credential? Why don't we talk to our partners there? Why aren't we talking to employers and businesses in terms of what they've done around employee engagement? They've been working on that for a long time, and some of them have really good sound strategies to ensure that the employees feel seen and heard. Why aren't we talking to them? Why don't we enter more learning conversations as opposed to, I have this grant due next week. Please, president of the community college, sign this and we'll tell you about the program when we have a chance.
That happens a lot, yeah. Yes, that happens a lot. I think I'm getting old. I am older than Tim. I can't see what the clock is. It 5 minutes?
Got about 5 minutes.
All right, 3 minutes. Oh, he said 3 minutes. Okay. I did send 100 questions. If there are, as we're wrapping up here, Chris, I think we started our conversation a couple months ago about some of the youth employment work that you're doing too. And I just want to make sure that we're giving you an opportunity to share a little bit of your learnings and what you're seeing in the great work that Corporation for Skilled Workforce is doing. Can you tap into a little bit of that youth employment research and projects that you're looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been conducting a national survey of youth workforce providers that are serving young adults ages 18 to 29 on behalf of the Annie Casey Foundation. They wanted to get a really good sense of just a snapshot of what is the state of the field. So that's the research that we've been doing. We did a national survey. We just concluded, what's today? Today, we just concluded the focus groups that we have done and getting information from hundreds of providers and trying to get a sense of, where are the strengths, where are the struggles, where are the opportunities. For example, that is where I learned about the credit for prior learning, applying that in a workforce development setting, that surfaced out of that work. So we've been learning some really interesting things there. I didn't know if there was something specific you were thinking of.
I think the worker-centered voice was really, I think, where we kicked off.
That's a big one. But we will be pulling all of the learnings into a public-facing report, and we will have a findings webinar that we'll be hosting later on in the year. Hopefully December-ish. So stay tuned for that information. But one of our goals was really to surface best practices and innovation so that you can learn from your peers and benchmark from your peers.
So I have a 13-year-old and a 12-year-old. So they'll be in that. Actually, I want to get them a job at WCAC. We're going to give them a job.
Audrey, she's right over there. Right there, Audrey. Raise your hand, Audrey.
Give them to work, get out of my house. They eat all my food. What I wanted to, that's true. Listen.
Kids are entrepreneurs. They're the Lemonade Brothers.
They do. They run a business. They've made some money. They made about $3,200 over the last 3 years.
Great lemonade.
Yeah, and they understand money and they hold me hostage. There's detriments to teaching certain things I didn't foresee. But I'm wondering, in that survey, was there anything about what that particular generation is looking for? And I just think about the overlap of technology, and I just think about my 13, they're more comfortable engaging on the technology than in real life. Excuse me. And so I think about, even with the advent of AI, there are certain human skills that it just can't replicate. And so I'm wondering, even in that report, is that sense of belonging? Is that, that emotional safety, this connection piece? Was the report focused on that? I know we got to wrap it, but I'm just really curious.
I know, we're getting the hook from both sides now, but we've got the mic, so take that. So a couple of things. So actually, your kids are completely on track. One of the things that we heard from providers is that what are young adults coming in wanting versus what you offer? Where's the tension there? And it is all around entrepreneurship. They are all coming in wanting opportunities for entrepreneurship, which I can't say anymore. I'm like, I so need that water right now. And there's a challenge here because the reason is it's in front of them every day. TikTok, social media, influencers, they see people, they see it as a way to get the salary they think they deserve very quickly, and not doing the whole, and of course it also speaks to how they see the value of a degree. So there's a lot of that going on too. And one of the things that we're learning is a lot of organizations aren't prepared for that. So what they do is they say, well, that's great. And those are really good skills that you can apply in this training program. And I would love to encourage programs to sit down with young adults and really understand why they want to be entrepreneurs. What are some of the conditions or reasons, what is their plan for themselves? And how can we work together rather than forcing a fit because this is what we have pre-existing? It goes back to that behavior change you were talking about. So that there is absolutely a tension there. And another thing, and I'm not going to say anything new to anyone in this room, the rise of mental health services and needs, and the fact that funding is not flexible enough to do that. And I did hear something really exciting at the SHIFT conference. One organization did some research on that and found that if they provided an EAP program for their staff, it didn't cost that much more to extend it to their program participants. And I've been ruminating on that ever since. Because if you think about some of the, especially with this generation, they absolutely hate Zoom and video, but then they don't want to engage socially because they have a lot of social anxiety. So there's a tension there. But being able to call someone for mental health supports that they don't have to see or talk to, it's not on Zoom, they don't have to know who they are. They can be honest and upfront about, this is what I need. How might we be able to leverage things like that to work on retention or to help them transition and continue to provide that as they transition into that job placement, so we don't just drop them off on the doorstep of an employer and say best of luck? Because there's a benefits cliff that is happening with the support services. There's a supports cliff that's happening with employment.
Part two.
Great way to end. We have to end. We could go on forever. Subscribe to The Ripple Effect. Chris will be on 2.0 version. We will invite her back. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. This is a great conversation.
Thank you.
All right, make sure you pose for a picture for us. Let's again give it up for the Ripple Podcast and their special guest, Chris Shannon. Second annual live podcast at the Summit.
You're listening to The Ripple Effect, a nonprofit imperative with Ron Waddell and Marybeth Campbell. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. We'll see you on the next one.